Federal Reserve study tracked over 30,000 couples and found something uncomfortable. The bigger the gap between your credit scores, not your incomes, your credit scores, so the more likely your relationship is to fall apart. And the financial damage from that gap, it's not 10 grand, it's not 50. For most couples, the quiet money mistakes they never actually discuss compound into a six-figure loss. We're talking $300,000 or more. Gone. Not from one bad decision, but from years of small ones that felt completely reasonable at the time. Here's what's wild about this. The couples losing the most money aren't the ones screaming at each other about spending. They're the ones who never bring it up at all. By the end of this, you'll know the exact patterns that quietly drain couples of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why the worst financial mistake in a relationship doesn't feel like a mistake when you're making it. And the specific shift that separates couples who build wealth from couples who silently bleed it. So there's a clip that went viral recently. A couple calling in about a financial mess, and the number was around $300,000. And everyone in the comments was doing what people do. Picking sides, blaming one partner, saying they'd never let that happen. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about these situations. That couple isn't unusual. They're average. Research from a study of over 1,000 Reddit posts and nearly 500 married individuals identified 8 recurring themes in how couples fight about money. And the two biggest? One-sided financial decisions and perceived irresponsibility. Not fraud, not gambling addictions, just one person quietly making calls the other person doesn't fully understand or agree with. That's the pattern. It's not dramatic, it's not cinematic, it's Tuesday night and someone bought something and the other person noticed but didn't say anything. Multiply that by 20 years. Here's the quiet mistake most people drift into. There's a massive asymmetry between how a financial decision feels in the moment and what it actually costs over time. Buying a car that's $8,000 more than you planned feels like a rounding error. You're already spending 35 grand. What's another 8? But that $8,000 invested instead over 20 years at a reasonable market return is worth roughly 40,000. Do that 3 or 4 times across a marriage. The slightly bigger house, the kitchen renovation that crept up, the lifestyle upgrade after a raise that never got discussed. And you're staring at $200,000, $300,000 in lost compound growth. Not because anyone was reckless, because nobody stopped to do the math out loud, together. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Yale researchers found that financial stress doesn't make couples talk more about money. It makes them talk less. Think about that. The couples who most need to have the conversation are the ones actively avoiding it. They called it anticipatory conflict avoidance. You're so sure the conversation will turn into a fight that you just don't have it. And the cost of that silence is enormous. A longitudinal study tracking married women over 25 years found that those who reported arguing often about money were nearly 3 times more likely to divorce. But here's the reversal that matters. The problem wasn't the arguing. The problem was what came before the arguing. Years of avoidance that let small misalignments become massive resentments. By the time you're fighting about money, you're actually fighting about trust. The money is just the scoreboard. Remember that Federal Reserve study I mentioned? 30,000 couples tracked from 1999 to 2012. Here's what actually matters about it. They weren't measuring income. They weren't measuring net worth. They were measuring credit scores, which are really just a proxy for financial behavior. How you handle obligations, whether you follow through, your relationship with future consequences. And the finding was stark. The larger the gap between partners' credit scores at the start of the relationship, the higher the probability of separation. Not because a credit score is magic, but because it reveals something you can't fake, your default financial habits when nobody's watching. And most couples never compare this. They'll spend 3 months planning a wedding seating chart and 0 minutes asking each other, honestly, how do you actually handle money when you're stressed? One more number, and it's a big one. Research on long-term relationships found that finances were the primary driver of conflict in 40% of disagreements. Not 20, not 15, 40. And a separate study tracking daily conflicts in married couples found that money fights made up about 1 in 5 of all conflicts for both husbands and wives. But and this is the part that should make you sit up. Financial disagreements were one of only 2 conflict types that significantly predicted divorce 5 to 7 years later. Even after controlling for income, debt, and total assets, meaning it wasn't about how much money the couple had, it was about how they communicated about it. You can be broke and aligned, or rich and headed for disaster. The money isn't the variable, the conversation is, as. So, here's the reversal. Most people hear $300,000 mistake, and they picture one catastrophic decision: a terrible investment, a secret credit card, a business that went sideways, but the actual $300,000 mistake. It's the absence of a conversation. It's the 20 years of "we should probably talk about this" that never becomes "let's actually sit down tonight." The research is annoyingly clear on this. There is no neutral ground. Couples are either practicing positive financial communication, discussion, expression, negotiation, or they're drifting into negative patterns by default. There's no coasting. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is expensive. All right, so what do you actually do with this? 4 things. First, know each other's numbers. Not just income, credit scores, total debt, savings rate, retirement balances. If you've been together for years and you can't name these within 10%, that's your first red flag. Not because the numbers need to be perfect, but because not knowing means you've been avoiding. Second, schedule the money conversation. I know that sounds painfully corporate, but the research backs it up. Couples who discuss finances on a regular, predictable schedule have dramatically better outcomes than couples who only talk about money when something goes wrong. Once a month. Put it on the calendar. Make it boring. Boring is good. Third, separate the decision from the emotion. When a financial choice comes up, a big purchase, a career change, a move, give it 48 hours before you commit. Not because you don't trust your instincts, but because the asymmetry between how it feels and what it costs needs time to become visible. And fourth, agree on a number above which neither of you spends without a conversation. Some couples use $500, some use $100. The number doesn't matter nearly as much as the agreement itself. It's a forcing function for communication, that's it. None of this is complicated, all of it is uncomfortable, and that discomfort is exactly why most couples skip it and end up on the wrong side of a 6-figure gap. If this hit a nerve, and not honestly, for most people in a relationship, some part of this should do me a favor and send it to your partner. Not as a passive-aggressive hint, as a conversation starter, and if you want more on the financial decisions that quietly shape your future, subscribe. I make these so you catch the expensive mistakes before they compound. I'll see you in the next one.